So, my dear students, please pay attention about this father of literary criticism, Aristotle. Aristotle, also called the Stagirite, Aristotle the peripatetic philosopher, established in 335 the Lyceum, a gymnasium sacred to Apollo, and directed it for 13 years. The academy was devoted to all available forms of knowledge. And what were the available forms of the knowledge? Mathematics, speculative, political philosophy, biological sciences, and the arts. On a modest estimate, his writings run to 400 volumes. He spent some 20 invaluable years under the tutelage of Plato. He was a student of Plato before establishing his own academy. Never again can there be such an instance of a brilliant, listen again, never again can there be such an instance of a brilliant student guided by an incomparable teacher. Now you are the same. If I am an incomparable, means if I am not that kind of teacher, but my student, you should be better than all of us. Never again can there be such an instance of a brilliant student guided by an incomparable teacher. We in India know him as the tutor of Alexander the Great. Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander the Great, who almost conquered northwestern India by back in 326 before Christ. Aristotle was an academic, a man of letters, a naturalist, and in the words of Eliot, a perfect critic. Aristotle owed his philosophical career to his great master Plato. He addresses many problems that Plato addressed, but in many cases he shows his radical departure from Plato, whose name is not mentioned in his famous treatise Poetics. The most valuable document in the history of Western criticism, interpreters of Aristotle use the term achromatic with reference to his works, by which is meant that each work of his cannot be completely understood without the aid of his other works, knowledge of his ethics, metaphysics, rhetoric. Examples would throw greater light on poetics. Aristotle dismisses Plato's views of the poet as an instructor when he says correctness in poetry is not the same thing as correctness in morals. Aristotle dismisses Plato's views, that means Aristotle dismisses his teacher's views of the poet as an instructor when he says correctness in poetry is not the same thing as correctness in morals, nor yet is it the same as correctness in any other act. Rhetoric and poetics contain the literary criticism of Aristotle, and both works are his lecture notes. Many of his concepts are still being discussed and reinterpreted to suit the present day needs of literary critics. He seems to be more modern than most modern critics. His insights into the artistic phenomena, the argument, and the sheer power of impeccable logic in which these are put forward make the treatise a veritable delight in the art of sustained philosophical inquiry. Unfortunately, we are not in possession of the original text of Poetics, but I am. But there are a few. This is Aristotle. Unfortunately, we are not in possession of the original text of Poetics, but there are a few manuscripts belonging to different centuries, which are available in translations. There is an 11th century translation that is perhaps the earliest and the most important. This is the primary source for all later translation. There is a 10th century Arabic translation and a few other 13th and 14th century translations of the Greek manuscripts. Though there are differences of opinions with regard to some passages, we are not up against textual difficulties in our understanding of the basic concepts of Aristotle. There are some inescapable stylist difficulties owing to the rather terse rendering of the text. The most plausible reason for, of course, is that the works are only the lectures not gathered together by his students and not as a consensuously developed full-fledged treatise. Another view not wholly acceptable, of course, is that his works are esoteric in nature, meant for a chosen and initiated few who may not need lengthy explanation. Apart from the Bible, no other work has appeared in more edition than Poetics. No other work of literary criticism or theory has exerted as strong an impact as this short and incomplete treatise, Poetics. Aristotle's book Poetics raises many important and fundamental critical issues, constantly debated by scholars and critics. There are wide disagreements among them about the full meaning and implications of these terms and concepts. However, there is a close argument that rigorously controls the key concept. Four of them deserve our special attention, and these are Mimesis, Catharsis, Hamartia, and Spoudeos. Mimesis. The most commonly accepted English equivalent of the Greek term is imitation. In a critical or literary context, the word imitation carries a special meaning. This term was peculiar to Greek thought. The term fine art is a later coinage. The Greek phrases were imitative arts and modes of imitation. The concept of imitation is centered to Aristotelian logic, even as it is to the Platonic, but with an essential difference. The Platonic view, as we saw earlier, is that the world is an imperfect reflection of an ideal archetypal order. The world is lower order of reality, and poetry, being an imitation of an imitation, is thrice removed from reality. Hence, Plato banished poets from his ideal commonwealth. Aristotle rejects Plato's doctrine of ideas, whereas for Plato, imitation implies copying, and hence trivial and insignificant. It is creative and dynamic for Aristotle. The artist is the maker, and his creations are imitations of human action, human character, and human emotions. The artist is the maker, and his creations are imitations of the human action, human character, and human emotions. It is a representation and not just copying that he has in mind. Not a representation of man as they are. The artist imitates things as they ought to be. And so, art is a free and voluntary activity of the human consciousness, free from any utilitarian motives. Arts are different from crafts. Again, imitation bears relationship to learning and acquiring knowledge. We derive pleasure. We derive pleasure from the artistic representation of even the most repelling and disgusting of things. We see into the life of things. Imitation leads us from the particular to the universal, which is how the experience in learning takes place. It is a clarification of particular representation which reveals to us universal laws of nature. Art is a source of insight into life. Mimesis also implies the active mode of constructing an art object according to the laws of probability and necessity, internal coherence, by which a universal form is imparted to the works. Aristotle gave a new dimension to the word imitation. It does not mean photographic reproduction. It is often said The drama holds the mirror up to nature. The image of nature we see in drama is very different from the image of ourselves that we see in mirror. The kings we come across in history books are different from the kings we see in Shakespeare's plays. Poetic imitation for Aristotle is an imitation of inner human action. Poetics, poetic imitation for Aristotle is an imitation of inner human action. Catharsis, as we have already discussed. Catharsis is a key word in Aristotle, occurring only twice in Poetics. The meaning of the later usage is what concerns us. It occurs in chapter 6, in which tragedy is defined as an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, in language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play in the form of action, not of narration, not of narrative, through pity and fear, effecting the proper purgation of these emotions. Aristotle's theory of catharsis may be considered to be his reply to Plato's charge against tragedy, that it devitalizes our emotion. The twin emotions of pity and fear or terror are dangerous and unhealthy. According to Plato, pity and terror constitute the twofold audience reaction to the sight of tragic suffering. Pity is aroused by the magnitude of the suffering undergone by the protagonist, and terror by the knowledge that tragic suffering and fate overtake one similar to us. This is the awareness that is brought home to us when we witness a tragedy. Pity and fear, terror, describes a process of moral and imaginative identification with the agent. When we come out of this involvement, we find ourselves inwardly transformed and feel a sense of release and serenity. Catharsis describes this process or experience. The meaning of the term has given room to a lot of discussions, out of which at least 4 may be highlighted. 1. Therapeutic. 2. Moral. 3. Structural. And 4. Intellectual. The therapeutic meaning, also called purgation, is akin to the homeopathic system of medicine that hold the view that the right cure of an illness is administering an agent similar to the disease. In this sense, catharsis is translated as purgation. It means that by presenting the emotions of pity and fear to the audience is cured of the excesses of these emotions. The assumption is that all of us are subject to excess of pity and fear, and tragedy is the panacea for such an illness. Tragedy effects catharsis by generating the very condition that it seeks to cure. Aristotle cites examples of music. Those who are in a state of external agitation pass into a state of serenity on listening or to exciting music. Similarly, spectators pass through purgations or emotional disturbance to emotional health or stability. But many scholars cannot and do not accept this medical metaphor. The theory that Aristotle should have conceived of an art from merely as a system of cure. The moral interpretation is closely analogous to the therapeutic, only it renders the term as purification. The purpose of tragedy is to purify the emotions of the audience by disciplining it and refining it by removing the excesses. Understood as religious metaphor, catharsis suggests the sense of purification. We normally shrink from sense of violence and crime in real life, or react to them with a feeling of horror and revulsion. It is paradoxical that we go to the theatre to experience delight from the spectacle of suffering. If you only see scenes of physical violence on the stage, such scenes would fill us with a sense of unrelieved horror. The elements of external suffering on the stage is but one part, and perhaps the least important part of the tragedy. True tragedy unfolds an inner process. It presents the protagonist in a state of clash at three levels: clash with oneself, clash with others, and clash with impersonal, inscrutable forces beyond one's control and knowledge. In this three dimensional conflict, the protagonist displays a certain dignity and probity. We see this person survive the epic struggle in moral or spiritual terms. Through he or she may be physically or technically overpowered. The apparent destruction of virtue, goodness, and innocence strikes terror. But ultimately, we realize that the good, virtuous, and innocent people may be destroyed, but the value of goodness, virtue, and innocence remain sound and secure. The moral foundation may be shaken, but it only becomes stronger and deeper. Our faith in the moral law suffers a temporary shock, only to be restored and fortified. It is this awareness that produces a feeling of settle. Recently, you have seen that Arnav Goswami, he was saying that now I have become more powerful and 10 times more energetic because the truth always wins. Indefinable joy or exaltations and serenity of an audience. We do not go to the theatre only to be purged of our emotions. F.L. Lucas is reported to have remarked, the theatre is not a hospital. Tragedy goes much beyond a clinical or surgical function. It is productive of pleasure springing from spontaneous compassions of the protagonist, who enters a larger, nobler world. Tragedy leads to an awakening. Tragedy leads to an awakening in new scales of value arises. In this sense, tragedy is lustatory in its influence, resulting in an enlargement of our spirit. The experience or and product of witness tragedy is similar to that of joy and purification, resulting from our participation in ritual. Once again, many scholars find it hard to accept that Aristotle should have conceived of art as a moralizing agent. Structural interpreters put forth the view that it is a process by which the protagonist can absolve himself of the supposed evils he has perpetrated, so that the audience can respond with emotions of pity and fear appropriate for the occasion, and be willing to free the protagonist from pollution. The intellectual interpretation builds up further by rendering this term intellectual clarification. Catharsis. Catharsis is a kind of insight experience. It is aesthetic experience that consists in the perception of coherence, a totality of significance underlying a series of incidents. This experience is, number one, pleasurable and not painful as the events would be if seen in the real life. Number two, the pleasure is similar to that arising from the process of learning. Number three, the learning process lies in the discovery of the relationship between the particulars of the plot and the universals they signify, and it is these universals that impart coherence and totality to the particulars. Number four, this experience leads to clarification and enlargement and deepening of awareness. According to Aristotle, the character of a wise, virtuous man is that he feels emotions, fear, anger, pity, pleasure, etc. at the right time with reference to the right people, the right object with the right motive, and in the right way. This is the principles of moderation. Nothing should be in excess. Catharsis obeys and conforms to this principle. Drama is a stimulus. It rouses our emotions from potentiality to activity. For the duration of the play, the potential emotions are arrested and directed towards the right object in the right way. When they return to the potentiality after the play, it is a more trained potentiality than before. Our responses are those of good, wise people. The result of catharsis is emotional balance or equilibrium. It involves restorations of emotional health. Learning is source of pleasure, and art is great for this very reason. That is why poetry is more philosophical than history. Whichever meaning one may support, Aristotle sees art not as a being harmful as Plato does, but as being beneficial, either as therapy or a moralizing agent, or as a release from guilt, or as a supreme form of learning.